Hi, this is Becky Spain. This is Lecture 1 covering Chapter 1 of Focus on Personal Finance. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to go through this book with you. I think there is so much incredibly valuable information in this book. And I think that as we go through this journey together, you're going to find that there's lots of nuggets of information here that are really going to help you along your life's journey as you move towards your personal financial goals. A full set of these PowerPoint slides are posted for you. I would encourage you to download those and look at those as you're going through the chapter and reading, and then also using those to study for your test. I will be hitting the highlights of the PowerPoint slides, and I won't be going through each and every one individually. I think that a lot of them have information that is complete in and of itself, along with the information you'll be reading in the book, and it'll shorten the time that you have to listen to me lecturing online if we just cover the highlights. So I'm excited. Let's get started. Chapter 1, Personal Financial Planning in Action. I really think that you should view your personal finances as if you are running a small business. There's so many elements that parallel that of running a small business, and if you'll consider your personal finances to be as serious as running a business, you'll make better decisions, you'll plan better, and in the long run, you'll have a higher quality of life because you will have control of your finances. I'm sure you'll hear me say more than one time throughout these lectures that if you do not manage your money will manage you. A certain path to lifelong financial frustration is never knowing what funds you have, where your funds are going, or living beyond your means. You simply just cannot spend more money than you're bringing in. And I'm sure that this book will be full of lots of information that will help you to get onto a path that will make your life have a higher quality and really have high value to you. So let's start by looking at our learning objectives for this chapter. Your first objective is to identify social and economic influences on personal financial goals and decisions. Financial goals are affected by your life situation, such as your income, your age, your household size, your health, your personal values, the current economic factors of our society, what are our current prices, what are interest rates, what are employment opportunities. The major elements of financial planning are obtaining, planning, saving, borrowing, spending, managing risk, investing, retirement, and estate planning. And that pretty much summarizes most of the chapters in this book, because we'll be going through these one by one. Our second learning objective is to develop personal financial goals. Now, financial goals should be SMART goals. I'm sure that you have heard this before if you have not practiced it, but SMART, S-M-A-R-T, stands for specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-based. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute. Your third objective is the calculation of time value of money situations associated with personal financial decisions. Now, if you do not get anything out of this entire book, this is a concept that I hope that you will learn and use. Every decision involves a trade-off with things that are given up. So you have to look at your personal opportunity and costs, your personal opportunity costs, which include your time, your effort, your health. Financial opportunity costs are based on the time value of money. Future value and present value calculations enable you to measure the increased value that results from saving, borrowing, investing, and purchasing decisions. And finally, objective number 4, implement a plan for making personal financial and personal career decisions. So let's get started. Let's look more closely at our objective number 1, identifying social and economic influences. So our social and economical influences certainly impact our personal financial goals and decisions. Personal financial planning is the process of managing your money to achieve personal economic satisfaction or quality of life. What is your standard of health, happiness, and comfort? A financial plan is a formalized report that summarizes your current financial situation, analyzes your financial needs, and then recommends a direction for your financial activities. These may be organized on the basis of spending, saving, investing, and then also borrowing decisions. So the financial planning environment is affected by your life situations, as well as your personal values and your economic factors. The personal factors include things like your age, your income, the size of your household, your attitude, and your beliefs. Your life situation is affected by various personal events, such as where you are in your life. Are you getting married? Are you getting divorced? Are you graduating? Do you have children? Are you going to have children? What's going on with your career? And then, of course, your values. Values are your personal beliefs and the ideas that a person considers correct, desirable, and important. And these most certainly will impact your financial decisions. Now, economic conditions will also certainly impact your financial planning. Economic conditions include such things as supply and demand, prices, and interest rates. What's going on with economic institutions such as business, labor, and government. All of this affects your personal finances. In addition to our local economy, we also have to look at our global influences. The spending by Americans for foreign goods and services and the investment in our country by foreign companies affect the interest rates and prices in our society. We can certainly see that impact here in Hawaii as we have so much influence from people who are outside of our area coming in for tourism. They purchase property while they're here, often driving up our own costs of things such as entertainment, food, property, homes. And then there's the use of the internet. So much of what we're purchasing is coming from other places as well, including from other countries. All of this has a global impact on our economy. I know you've studied supply and demand. The main cause of inflation, the main cause of inflation is an increased demand without a comparable increase in supply. So inflation is most harmful to people who live on fixed incomes or in an economy where raises are frozen. So I know that recently I have been in higher ed now for 10 years, and because of all of the things that are happening in higher education, many salaries across the United States have been frozen. And for years, I was actually part of that. So I went 5 years without a raise. My salary, for all intents and purposes, was frozen. So I was on a fixed income. And then inflation hit my pocketbook harder than it did a peer who was still receiving cost of living increases. So it's not always those that are elderly or on fixed income that are impacted negatively by inflation. Consumer prices, consumer spending, interest rates, and other economic factors affect the financial planning environment. Now let's talk about CPI for just a quick minute, the Consumer Price Index. I want to make sure that you understand what that is. It is the measure of the average change in price that a consumer pays for a fixed basket of goods. So in other words, it's based on these certain items that you would buy in a week, and you put it into your basket and you bring up the price, and how much does that cost? And then over time, what's the change in that? What's the measure of inflation on buying those exact same items week to week to week? And that is your Consumer Price Index. Inflation or deflation is the general level of prices, whether they're going up or whether they're going down. In times of inflation, the buying power of the dollar decreases, which will impact your budget and your overall financial plans. Most of us will borrow money over the course of our life, whether it's when we purchase a home, when we purchase a car, if we take out loans to go to school, credit card interest rates. There's tons of ways that we are charged interest, and we need to be aware of what those interest rates represent. They represent the cost of money. Like everything else, money has a price. The forces of supply and demand influence those interest rates. As the amount saved and invested by customers increases the supply of money, interest rates tend to decrease. But as a consumer, business, government, and foreign borrowing increase the demand for money, interest rates also tend to increase. Page 7 of your book The author talks about 8 basic financial planning activities. Each one of these corresponds with 1 or 2 chapters that we'll be covering throughout our time together. Chapter 1 is what we're covering right now, and we're looking at obtaining. Next week and the week after, we'll look at planning. Planning for current living expenses and future financial security. Then in Chapter 4, we'll look at savings. Savings for emergencies, unexpected bills, replacement of major items, and special purchases. Chapter 5 is borrowing in a responsible manner. Then Chapter 6 and 7 will be looking at spending to meet daily living needs. Chapters 8 through 10 look at managing our risk. Chapters 11 through 13 look at investing for long-term financial security, and then finally our final chapter will look at retirement and estate planning. Our learning objective number 2 for this chapter is to develop personal financial goals. Many Americans have money problems due to poor planning, weak financial habits such as spending too much, using too much credit cards, and taking out too many loans, and then extensive number of marketplace influences such as advertising, selling efforts, and product availability. Advertising in particular really hits us hard, much more than people often want to admit. We see advertisements everywhere we look, whether it's on television, radio, when we're driving, when we're reading, we see advertisements everywhere. And most often they're telling us that if we want to be liked, if we want to be successful, if we want to be this or that, we need their product. And that begins to eat away at our goal setting, leading us to not always make the best choices. To be successful financially, we need to set financial goals, and then we need to measure our decisions against the goals that we've set for ourselves. Goals are normally set up in 3 different time increments. The first is short-term goals, which is usually achieved within the next year or so, such as saving for an annual vacation or paying off a small debt. The next are your intermediate goals, which are 1 to 5 years. And then long-term goals involve financial plans that may take more than 5 years, such as retirement or college savings. One of the best tools that my husband and I had during the years of our marriage together is that when we first got married, and we've been married for 40 years this April, we set up a notebook that wrote the year at the top of each page, and then we wrote what would happen during those years, so such as when we had children, how old each one of our children would turn that year. That helped us to be able to set up short-term, intermediate, and long-term financial goals based on where we would be in our life cycle, the things that would be going on in our life, and the things that we wanted to achieve. I really felt like it was an incredible tool, and I hope that you'll think about setting up some kind of long-term, handwritten goal for yourself. There's evidence that tells us that when you write down your goals, you are so much more likely to achieve the goal than if it's just in your head. Some items that should be in your goal book should be for things such as your consumable products, which usually occur on a periodic basis, involving items used up relatively quickly, such as food, clothing, and entertainment spending, those types of things. Your durable products, your goals usually involve infrequent, expensive items such as needing a new appliance, a new refrigerator, a new stove, motor vehicles, sporting equipment. Most durable goals consist of tangible items. In contrast, however, many people overlook intangible purchases. And not only should they be considered, such as personal relationships, health, education, and leisure, but these also are things that improve your overall well-being. So whenever you're writing out your goals throughout the years, be sure and include things from each one of these areas, and don't skip over your intangible. In addition to the notebook that my husband and I shared, I also created a spreadsheet in Excel where I took and listed 1 through 100, and then I listed items that I would like to accomplish sometime in my lifetime. Most of the things that were on my list were intermediate and long-term goals, but they did include items from all three of that consumable, durable, and intangible products. And it was a lot of fun to go through and think what I would like to do and when I would like to do that. Gave me kind of a bucket list to work from, and it was fun numbering 1 to 100 and then trying to get things in each one of the different categories, because it really challenged me to think thoroughly about what I'd like to accomplish financially in my life, or what things I would like to accomplish, and what were the financial ramifications of accomplishing that. So we've already been talking about goal setting. The best type of goal to set is a SMART goal. You're probably familiar with SMART goals, but this is such a great way to set a goal if you want it to be realistic and reachable, that I think bears taking a couple of minutes to review. Any goal that you set for yourself should be specific. You should know exactly what your goal is. It should be measurable by a specific amount. It should be action-oriented, providing the basis for your personal financial activities. It should be realistic. It should involve goals based on your income and your life situation, and it should be time-based. It should have a time frame for achieving that goal. So though it's really easy to say, I'd like to save for retirement so that I can travel, that's not a SMART goal. If you want it to be a SMART goal, it needs to be specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-based. You need to determine specifically how much am I going to save, so that you can measure whether or not that's happening. It needs to be specific in detail. You need to be able to actually realistically put that much money back to save towards that, and then you need to have a time base for how long that you want to do that. So to turn that into a SMART goal, you might say, I'd like to save $500,000 for retirement between now and the time that I am 65. I will do this by putting back 10% of my income and investing that, and then do the math with some rough calculations to make sure that if you do that, can you really reach your goal of $500,000? If not, you'll need to adjust some of those elements, but that's just an example. Objective number 3 is using the time value of money to evaluate personal financial decisions. In every financial decision, you're going to sacrifice something in order to obtain something else that you consider desirable. Opportunity costs may be viewed in terms of both personal and financial resources. The most common personal opportunity cost is time. Time spent in studying, working, shopping. Whenever you spend it on one activity, you cannot use it for another. You must also consider financial opportunity costs. Like time, money allocated for one purpose cannot be used for another. I know whenever we gave my daughter her very first checking account, she did not understand that because she still had checks didn't necessarily mean there was still money in the bank. If she wrote the check and spent the money for one thing, she could not write another check and spend the same dollar amount for something else. It was a tough lesson for her to learn. The time value of money refers to the increase of an amount of money as a result of interest earned. This is the one concept that I hope, if you don't get anything else out of this class, this is the one that you grasp. There are some supplemental videos posted, as well as additional teaching in the full deck of this PowerPoint presentation that will help you to actually go through the step of the computation of interest, and I hope that you take the time to actually go through that so that you can see how the time value of money really impacts your funds, your ability to save. So the computation of interest is based on the amount of savings, the annual interest rate, and the length of time the money remains deposited. It's really important for you to grasp that savings today equals more money tomorrow, where spending today equals lost interest. Once again, you can only spend the money once, and if you spend the money, it's not being saved and earning interest for tomorrow. I read a book once called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where the author talked about his father and then his stepfather and the differences in how they approached money and why one was always broke and why one always had money. And the difference was that his father had the attitude that you should spend today, so he never had any money saved up for tomorrow, and he never had money working for him through interest earned for tomorrow, where his stepdad had learned that principle and was able to save money so that it was earning interest and it was working for him for tomorrow. And it made a huge difference in his stepfather's quality of life. There is a box at the bottom of page 13 of your book that says, "Did you know?" And it says, if you invest $2,000 a year at 9% from age 31 to 65, those funds will grow to $470,000 by age 65. However, if you save $2,000 a year at 9% for only 9 years, age 22 to age 30, at age 65, the money will be worth $579,000. It is so important to start saving now and then leave the funds alone to grow so that you can meet those goals that you have, such as traveling after you have retired. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. There was just one or two things I did want to make sure that we hit, and the first is that future value, or also referred to as compounding, is the amount to which current savings will increase based on certain interest rate and a certain time period. Future value calculations may be used for both single amounts and equal deposits. And then your present value, also referred to as discounting, is the current value for a future sum based on a certain interest rate and a certain time period. Present value calculations may also be used for single amounts and for a series of amounts deposited. Fourth and final goal for this chapter is to implement a plan for making personal, financial, and your personal career choices. This exhibit is in your book on page 16, Exhibit 1-4, and this shows the process for personal financial planning. The very first step is to determine your current financial situation in regard to income, savings, living expenses, and debts. Your second step is to develop your financial goals. You need to analyze your financial values and goals that you want to set for the course of action or where you want to go. Step number 3 is to identify alternative courses of action. Various alternatives associated with financial decision-making are usually based on deciding to either continue the same course of action or expand your current situation, change your current situation, or take a new course of action. So applying that to, let's say, the amount that you're saving. If you continue the same course of action, you're saying that what you're saving is appropriate for where you want to go. You may want to expand it by increasing the amount that you're saving each month. You may decide that what you're doing to save money is not the way that you want to be doing it, and you want to start investing in maybe U.S. savings bonds or some other opportunity. Or the final one is you may want to decide that the best use of your present savings is to pay off debts that you have that are incurring interest rate at a higher rate than you can actually save the funds. It's important that you consider all of your alternatives, as the more that you are creative in looking at your situation and what choices you have, the more likely you will be to make wise financial decisions. So building on step 3, you want to evaluate the alternatives that are available to you. So every decision closes off alternatives. The opportunity cost is what a person gives up by making the choice. This cost commonly refers to as a trade-off of a decision, sometimes cannot be measured in dollars. Decision-making will be an ongoing part of your personal and financial existence. You will need to consider the lost opportunities that result from your decisions. Uncertainty is a part of every decision. In many financial decisions, identifying and evaluating risk is a difficult task, but the best way to consider risk in such decisions is to gather all of your information based on your experiences. And don't forget to ask for advice from others who've also had experiences. and do your research. Step number 5 is to develop a plan of action to achieve your goals. And finally, step number 6, and this is really a critical step, you need to review and revise your plan. So you need to think of this in a circular pattern where you're constantly going through this process and constantly evaluating if whether or not what you're doing is moving you towards the financial goals that you've set up for yourself. Finally, because for the majority of us, what we do for a living is what drives our financial income, we need to look at our career choices and how that informs our financial planning. So the average person now today, in today's economy, changes jobs 7 times during their lifetime. And not just their job, but their career. And this hasn't always been this way. Whenever I was growing up, when I was a young person, the goal was to get into a company and work your way up from the bottom and stay with that company as you move your way through. And now it's not that way at all. We look at ambiguity of job choices as part of what we have to live with every day, and moving from career to career and actually doing something different that builds on or uses some of the skills that we learned in the previous position is a way of life. A lot of that is impacted by today's market. Our rapidly changing business market drives the need for people to constantly be reinventing themselves and learning new skills to be able to stay up with the changes that are happening in today's business world. The life work you select will be key to your financial well-being and to your personal satisfaction, because if you're not making enough money to afford the lifestyle that you want, there's going to be dissatisfaction there. But then again, you have to balance that against what it's going to take you to get the education and how many hours a week that you'll be working to do that job, and how that also once again plays in with all of your personal satisfaction goals. So just like all that we've talked about with financial choices, your career choices in professional development alternative have risk and opportunity costs too. And just like with your financial choices, as you're looking at your age and where you are in the life cycle, and whether or not you're getting married or divorced or graduating or whatever, those all impact what you're doing with your finances. Where you are in your life and your personal values are also going to impact the decisions that you're making concerning the job choice that you might want to make. So while you're young and you're single, working lots of hours, and I know I did that in my younger days. I worked in corporate America where minimum hours a week were required at 60 hours. I did that when I was younger, but then as my kids got older and my family got bigger, I had to make choices. And one of the decisions that I made was to move from corporate America into education, where my salary was less, but so were my hours. They were more controllable, and I wasn't working 60 hours a week. So you'll have opportunities throughout your life to make trade-offs, whether they're financial or career. And once again, these play hand in hand and move in tandem. In closing, I want to remind you to review the supplemental videos that go with this chapter. They're going to help you tremendously with your homework as well as with the exam. There are several on the time value of money. There's also one on goal setting and one on the personal planning process. So be sure and access those. Take time to review those. I have tried to keep our lecture time to a minimum so that you have time to review these valuable videos, which will help walk you through some of the additional information that you will need to be successful in this course. As always, feel free to reach me through the information that's on the syllabus, and I look forward to seeing you again in Lecture 2.